title for the workshop, I said, Loving Your Enemies, because I had just finished, I'm on the faculty for the Hayden Dream Institute in Asheville, North Carolina, that teaches people to work with their dreams and teaches dream workers and people doing spiritual direction. And they had asked me to do a workshop on loving your enemies, and I said, God is playing a joke on me because I am in no position to talk about loving your enemies because I'm so mad at my enemies right now. So I thought that was, like God saying, okay, you gotta, it's time for you to work on this, woman. So work on yourself. So you get to do the speech. So I went back and I looked at some of those words that have been spoken, that have been attributed to Jesus. And I'm a very suspicious Bible reader. I always want to know who's talking and why, and why is this being said, and did Jesus really say that? Does this make sense with other things that Jesus has said? Because you just, I'm not one of those folks that thinks that God sat in heaven and wrote the Bible and then sent it down on tablets for us to put in the King James English. There are folks who seem to believe that. And if it works for them, it works for them. It does not work for me. So when I look at this, love your enemy, you've heard it said you should love yourself, but to love your enemy, but I say you have to love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you. And when I read things like that, I say, okay, that sounds great for me living in Atlanta, Georgia, in my lovely little cul-de-sac street that's quiet and I'm mostly safe, I'm mostly comfortable. So to think about the folks that are out there somewhere wreaking havoc on the world and that I can call enemies and that I can sit in my house and pray for them and love them, that's, you can do that. It's all very nice, neatly tied up. But if I'm sitting in the middle of the Sudan and my child is starving to death because somebody has decided that they don't want to send food or pay money for me to have food, that's a whole different story. If I'm in Gaza, it's a different story. If I'm in Ukraine, it's a different story. And I try to think about all of the things that I'm thinking are so cool to believe in light of that. How does it hold up when you get outside of your little universe? Does it make any sense then to hold this particular position in terms of a more global understanding? I know that you can't take an idea and then go to the most extreme place with it that can be gotten to if you're trying to destroy the idea. But if you hold on to a set of understandings of how to deal with people and interact with people, it needs to make sense across the board. It needs to hold up everywhere. It's like if we have a bad habit, somebody dies and people say they suffered and they died, and people say, well, they're better off. Well, you don't know. You don't know what you're talking about. And so it's better not to say things like that. It's better to just simply be present to people. And we need to learn a few things about being present in silence, because some of the stuff we say, I've had people tell me how devastating it was for some religious person to say some flippant thing like that to them. I have a habit now with everything that's going on in this country. I have a habit of saying, well, it could be worse. That's my little mantra to myself. It could be worse. I could be in Ukraine, I could be in Russia, and it would be worse. And so I was in Memphis speaking a few weeks ago, and at the coffee station, I said good morning to a young woman, and she said, good morning, and she said, how are you? And I said, I'm fine, and I said, how are you? And she said, oh, not so good, and she was slow answering, and I said, in my little flippant mantra, well, it could be worse. And she said, no, I don't think it could be worse for us today, because I'm here because my 6-year-old and 8-year-old nieces died. And I said, oh my God, what happened? And she said, they were in a house fire. and they weren't able to get the girls out, but the mother and the brother jumped out of a window, and they then helicoptered the children to Memphis to the hospital, and the little girls died. So this woman is standing at the coffee shop that morning, and for her, it could not be worse. And it was like I said earlier today about the driver not contacting me, God's always given me these introductions that I didn't know I was going to have to ideas, but one has to be careful what you say, and just because it's true for you doesn't necessarily mean it can be just globalized in every situation. So in the light of this kind of way of looking at the world, I've been interrogating myself about this business of what does it mean to love your enemies? Because if you sit and talk about this behind a gated community, or as the community I just described that I live in, which is not gated, but is quite safe and quite calm and quite pleasant, it's one thing, and when you are in the middle of your enemy trying to kill you, it's another thing. I listened to a Palestinian last night as we were driving up, talking about his plight in Gaza. And he said, I'm not alive and I'm not dead. I'm here. I can't go out into the world because he'll get killed from the Israelis. He doesn't have a job. He doesn't have a life. People that he knew are dead. So what do you say in the light of that? Love your enemies, you see. And I think it's important to know that I don't have to know what to say, but I can't be on a horse about loving your enemy being something that just goes, I can paint a brush that I can paint the whole world with. So for me, the first part is being in conversation with the complexity of the thing you're talking about and understanding the paradoxical nature of it, because it's oftentimes things have two sides of truth. It's true here and it's true here, and there's space in between that makes it difficult to navigate, to appreciate. And I have come to realize that the living in the tension of those paradoxes is what people don't want to do. And that's why we get fundamentalists saying it's this way, and it's cut and dried. But it's not this way and this way. It's this way, and there's some other stuff in here, and you have to kind of dance with it. And what makes the dance worse is all of it is true. See, if some of it was a flat lie, it would be easy, because you just say, that's a lie, this is true. Well, no, it's not that clear. So as I struggle with trying to live in that murkiness, the first thing that came to me was that to love your enemies is not about the enemy at all. It's got really nothing to do with your enemy, because your enemy doesn't know anything about you except that they've decided to do whatever they're doing to you. And they don't care what you do. You can hate them, love them, imagine sending out a hit person to get them. Whatever you do, you can do it, but it has no effect on them whatsoever. And there's some people that I was really upset with, and I thought, I bet they don't even know they don't think about me, and I'm letting them just dominate in my head. So love, and I'll get to that in a little bit, mitigates against allowing the enemy to take over your life, to keeps the enemy from becoming a negative force in your life. And to love your enemy is not that, I don't think that for 1 minute that is the same kind of mandate that we got for loving yourself and loving God and loving your neighbors. I think it's a whole different kind of thing. I don't think I think we got ourselves in a mess when we just think of love as one thing. That's the first mess we got into. And the second mess is we think of love as some little whipped cream on a sundae with a strawberry on top of it, and it's that 1 Corinthians tough love stuff really gets you into a whole different place with that. So wishing well for people, that's the first thing. You know, somebody, not doing evil for evil. Not wanting to, I mean, somebody did something to me, and I used to imagine myself like blowing up the building they lived in. You know, they had like, and then I thought, but if I do that, you know, somebody will see me, and then they'll say, you know, that woman that's going around talking about peace all the time, I saw her blowing up a building. So I decided, thought better of it, you know. But to be clear, there is nobody on this planet that could do anything to me that would make me treat them as less than a human being. So even if you're my enemy, if you just murdered somebody in my family, whatever you have done, if I see you in dire straits and I can do something to help you, I will do it, because I'm a human. And to do less is to be not acting like a human. So loving your enemy requires you never to quit being a human, which means that if you do the same evil back to the people who've done evil to you, and you think they're dehumanizing, you just made yourself a dehumanizer while you thought you were doing a good thing. So see how quirky this gets? It's not just a simple little, oh, I'm gonna have good feelings about you. It doesn't have much to do with feelings. It has to do with intention. It has to do with determination. And it has to do with thinking about it before you get there. You don't get to just wake up with somebody that tore down your house and say, oh, I think I gotta figure out how I'm gonna think about you now. No, you don't get to abuse anybody in my presence. That's not a part of this. It's not like you can make excuses for people who abuse people because you're trying to love your enemy. No, that doesn't work. If somebody is doing bad to somebody else, what they get is to be held accountable, whatever that means. You up all the way to being arrested and put in jail and having the keys thrown away. I mean, it could be that much of what they needed to be accountable. But the attitude that we carry while we're working on the accountability really is about us and about keeping our own selves in the right place. Getting our own selves straight and keeping our own selves in the right place. When we do that, our attitudes toward folks who do us wrong change. It may take a while to forgive them. It may take a while to heal from it. We may never forget it, but we have not allowed them to run our lives. We have not allowed them to keep us from being who we are choosing to be. So when you give somebody else the power to make you be something other than who you want to be, you've done something to yourself. So I think Jesus is trying to tell us, if you love people, if you respond to people out of that place of humanity, of I care, I don't want bad things to happen to you, I just wish you would have been a better person, you know, and I will do what I have to help make you be a better person. You know, I mean, I think resistance to evil, though, is a part of the work we're called to do. So in resisting evil, when people have allowed evil to come and be their energy source, we have to resist that. That doesn't mean we have to hate them, though that's a short walk from resisting to hatred. Sometimes I think we might think we have to hate to have the energy to resist. I don't think that's true. I think you can look at somebody and know, you could be a better person, and because you're not, I have to see you as somebody to resist and keep it out here. For me, that's called setting boundaries. You know, you have people in your life that you need to put them, my mama used to say, handle them with a long-handled spoon. And that means set boundaries. So you need to set boundaries. Setting boundaries and deciding when people are negative to you and all that, it's got nothing to do with, we smush it all together. And it's got nothing to do with the choose who is really an enemy. So when you talk about loving your enemies, the one other thing I want to say before I start listening to your questions is you need to decide, why are you naming that person as an enemy in the first place? Is the person an enemy because they actually did something to you that was clearly designed to destabilize your life and mess your life up and hurt you? Or do you just not like them for some kind of reasons that you can't quite put your finger on, and now you've designated them as an enemy, and now you have all these other things going? You know, are you following me? That it's a whole process. And when you get to the point where you clearly see it, maybe they weren't the enemy you thought they were. You know, and the other thing I said this morning, in God's economy, nothing is useless. Nothing. In God's economy. In a capitalist world, many things are useless. In God's economy, nothing is useless. So whatever is happening, if you engage it in the way, through the lens of love, mostly love, really, truly, deeply loving yourself, you will end up to be able to see how that thing, no matter how much your head bled from it, contributed to something. Only you can see. You don't need other people telling you. You know, I don't want anybody telling me when somebody's beat my head up. I don't want anybody telling me, well, just wait a while and you'll understand how this is going to work for good. You know, the scripture that says everything that works together for good, it did not say everything is good. Everything works together for good does not imply that everything is good. But it seems to me that if we can analyze what has happened and see what it's got to do with us and how it fits into our journeys, then we may be able to make that assessment. But I'm not going to tell somebody whose child died because they didn't get food that was sitting in a warehouse rotting that had already been paid for. I'm not going to tell them everything works together for good, because I don't believe that. In that instance, I don't know how that person will ever come to see that is good. It is not my job to figure that out. And I can't figure it out, and I can't let that incident determine who I'm going to be. You see how complicated it is? Because I want to have a fit and be angry and go find the folks that would do that kind of thing and do revenge and do a whole bunch of stuff. I have to work on myself, you know. So, you know, I used to tell my students, I taught classes called The Nature and Manifestation of Prejudice. I ran the African American Studies program at Mercer University for 25 years. And I used to tell my students, don't leave this class if you don't learn anything else in this class. Remember the complexity of this. It's complicated. So we go around, we can feel badly because we got this list. You know, talk about Trump having an enemies list. He should see mine. You know, and if I could get a one-way ticket for all of them to go off to Mars or somewhere, that would just suit me well. Now, what am I going to do with that? Am I going to sit around and try to see how much I can conjure up bad stuff for them? Because whatever I'm thinking, whatever I'm doing, whatever I'm imagining, it's all inside of my head and has no impact on them. None whatsoever. Unless it's somebody that's in my community or in my family that I can do something mean to. But for the most part, that's not even the case. And half the time, even if it is the case, we don't do anything. We just think about it. So think about how much energy you can end up spending in your head, killing off your enemies while they are off doing positive things and don't even know you, they're not thinking about you at all. So then I have to say to myself, why am I not willing to let this go? What is it? What is the message here for me that I need? Or is there a message, may even be a better question. Is there a message here for me in this situation? Because remember, nothing is ever useless when in God's economy. I think that political repression and oppression, things like slavery and genocide and all of that stuff, that is such a big handful of conflict that has to be resolved by the people that are the victims of those things. That it takes, that all of us who did not experience them have to be incredibly careful about how we even talk about it, think about it, and how we think that what we think even affects any of what they might think. There are some things that we just can't answer. And that's also something. There's not going to be a nice little formula that says you do these things and you're all right with your enemies. No, you'll have days where you know, but you know there's some bottom line, and the bottom line is, I don't care how much I don't like you and how much bad you did to me, if I see you on the road bleeding, I'm calling 911. And I know that about myself because that's my personal commitment to being a human. Now, I might wish you go ahead and die, but I'm not going to participate in it. You know? Listen, y'all, God already knows, so why do I want to play a game with myself? You know, really, don't you know? I mean, you all know what I'm talking about. Everybody here knows. Yeah, I'm doing this, but I'm sure holding my nose. Because it's, I mean, in a way. So I got off of my back about this, thinking I'm going to be some, paragon of virtue when it comes to this, because I'm going to be just where I am, struggling with it and working on it and interrogating myself and trying to tell the truth to myself and looking for what was the lesson in it and what can I learn. And I have had that happen now a good bit in the last couple of years. I'll be 80 in February, and so I thought that I had pretty much figured most of this stuff out until I got a whole new course outline. And then I discovered that, oh, no, you're just getting started, girl. You might be in first grade, but no, that's questionable. And so then I decided, well, maybe the stuff that happened wasn't just random. Maybe it really was trying to teach me something. And guess what? I was right. It was teaching me, number one, to pay attention better, to believe people when they tell you who they are, to believe them, because all of the stuff that happened was because these were things along the way that I chose to say, oh, well, yeah, they did that, but that's okay. But then finally they did the big thing that made me say, I should have gotten rid of you way back there, but I didn't do it, and now I missed my chance, So the lessons, I want to say, when you get through looking at the lessons, when you get through making sure you have rightfully named the enemy and you're not just naming somebody that pissed you off today. You can't be an enemy just because you didn't say hello in the right way. I mean, if somebody snubbed you a little bit or you didn't get invited to a party and you make them an enemy, it's your problem. Because they're not an enemy. You don't know why they didn't invite you, and you didn't ask them. You just decided to keep killing them in your head. And that's not a good response, actually. But the enemies, who are they really, and what did they do, and why did they do it? And if sometimes you know, sometimes you don't. And are we always totally innocent when it comes to, did we do nothing? Or what, that could have been misperceived, that has made this person act this way, and now I'm sending stuff back to them, and we're not talking to each other, so we just got enemy energy going back and forth. It's very layered, and because we are socialized in such a peculiar way, we don't talk about enough stuff, and this keeps us able to stay in war, in turmoil. If you keep naming enemies rather than really figuring out what else could be going on, before you know it, you have to start killing off some folks. So I want to say that the love that I think that undergirds this is, first of all, the part of ourselves that make us look under every rock for the truth. So we look in ourselves, we look in the situation, we look everywhere, look at this from every angle to see, is this truly an enemy? That's loving kind to ourselves. Why am I making this person an enemy? Why am I, maybe not making this the wrong word, why am I allowing this person to be perceived in my head as an enemy? It's a good question to be asking ourselves. And then we have to decide, what do I want to do about it? How much energy do I want to spend on this? What is this worth? And number, whatever, I've lost track of the numbers, but the next number is, what am I getting out of naming them as the enemy? How does it benefit me? Could be benefiting you, may not be, and if it's not, that answer should come up. You see, what happens is if you do this the way Jesus might have been saying, you start to look at yourself again, because that's the one person you've got some control over. And we certainly don't have any control over those outsiders out there that we've named enemy. That someone said that if you stay in this bubble of, just hatred and processing and kind of cooking in your own stew pot, it's like drinking poison and expecting your enemy to die. To yourself, to your soul. Jesus is saying, if you love these people and pray for folks who despitefully use you and decide that you don't want to do evil, an eye for an eye, it will benefit you. It will benefit you. This is a conversation about taking care of yourself. So it gets back to loving yourself. Do I love myself enough to be willing to interrogate this? I was really mad at somebody for something they did, and then I had to really interrogate myself about the ways that I allowed the space to develop for that thing to happen, which I didn't want to take responsibility for. I just wanted them to be the bad guy, which is what we like, isn't it? I mean, somebody else is responsible for this mess. Surely I didn't have anything to do with it, because I don't do that. Well, yes, we do. So I don't know what you thought this conversation might be, but it's not a prescription. It is an additional invitation to developing a deeper sense of consciousness. Because the more conscious we are about ourselves and about the nature of the world, the better off we are in dealing with everything. And then loving folks who don't wish us well. I mean, loving people who really are the perpetrators of energetic systems that harm people. It does not mean I'm taking them to lunch. That's never going to happen. So then it must mean something about my attitude toward them and my understanding of how I have to deal with them as a person. Because I'm not going to lunch with them, because that gets into liking. I don't go to lunch with people I don't like. And I think it's so ridiculous when people say, well, I love them, but I don't really like them. No, you're deceiving yourself. You don't really love them either. You're just trying to cover up. It's better to say, that person is very challenging to me. And I know that this is a fellow human being, and there's something in them they bring some message some kind of way to me, and I hadn't figured it out yet. But until I do, I'm keeping my distance. If that's probably more honest than trying to say, I love them, but I don't like them. Because we know better. We know when we say that stuff. And it's not all about feelings anyway. A lot of it is about thinking and behavior. So if I don't stop now, you won't have a chance to ask me anything. So let me stop talking. I hope this is troubling enough, that this is what I've said, to give you some stuff to think about. Because that's what I think is the best way to deal with this, is to prompt people to begin to interrogate all of this and stop. We come up with all these little, want to have these little prescriptions and work it all out and label it all, love your enemy, love your neighbor, do this, that, and that, and we don't do any of it. We're just kind of running around fooling ourselves. And so I think if we deal with it more honestly and really decide where we are and what we're doing and what we really believe, then we'll get further down the road. So what do you have to say? Yes, ma'am. And speak up so they can, maybe you stand up. I don't know if people can hear you.
I'll just turn around a little.
Well, just speak loudly.
Okay. I feel that the last year or so has been personally very challenging for me. And I feel like I've been kind of in my own safe little cul-de-sac. And then I come out into the world. I used to watch the news with some regularity. And I found myself within a normal context of my daily life of feeling full of despair. And that is not something I have ever felt in my life. And I found it brutally awakening, hugely disconcerting, and just felt like crawling back into bed, and yet everything was going on around me. And speaking to the evil that's out there and wanting to slay all of my perceived enemies that were wreaking this havoc that was sending me into despair, they didn't know who I was.
Right.
And I find it, I had to really, really, really work on a phrase that I had never really ever approached was give it to God. And I had never really prayed that because I had never felt beyond something I could somehow make a change coming from myself. And so I find that concept of loving your enemy, but realizing that there's something in me that's getting that reaction really hit me this year, that it's hitting me, but no one else is really aware of that.
Right.
So I find I'm struggling with that. I'm coming out of my despair bubble, but I think that's the biggest challenge I find is just dealing with, to just jump into another thing. I think Jesus, in a way, had it a lot easier because he didn't have to work with the media. And I say that somewhat facetiously, but I say it with a great deal of import. I really feel like if you've got a group of people, or you've got a beggar, or you've got someone that's ill, he knew what to do.
Yeah.
And he taught others, this is what you do, this is my way.
Right.
And I feel like now, it's just so splintered that finding and coming back to that kernel of what would Jesus do is really hard to get back to get to that little kernel in us that we were born with, that he touched us.
I think Jesus was such a much better listener than we are, and Jesus had a much better grasp on what was really the nature of reality than we do, and understood that the inner reality and grounding was from the place from which you have to operate. And so part of what happens, which has happened to all of us, is when the outer world crumbles, it's destabilizing, because no matter how much we think it doesn't matter, it matters. We like routine. We like things to be sensible. We like we like little kids like to hear the same story 50 times, so they know the ending. They can tell the whole story, but they still like to hear it. Well, we're not that removed from them. We like for stuff to not be too crazy, not to be disrupted. So we've been disrupted as a nation, this country, all of us, everybody, no matter who you are, what your politics, that's beside the point. You've been disrupted. So then why? Why is it disrupting? Because God has already told us this is the empire, and it's not supposed to be our home, right? I mean, the empire, this is the world. This is what the kingdom of God is supposed to be standing up in at least opposition to. But we thought the empire was closer to home than it is. We invested in the empire in ways, we have invested in the empire in ways that are not helpful. And so when the empire is in trouble, we all of us feel that kind of disruption that we wouldn't have felt if we had a better sense of, well, it's not my home anyway. We can't count on this. This is all going down. It's all going down. And then you have to be like Habakkuk, if it all goes down, we will still praise the Lord, because we know something bigger and deeper. And we know it in our heads, but it hadn't quite sunk deep enough into us so that it didn't lead us to despair. Because all of us, we share your feeling hopeless, feeling enraged, feeling like you want to go tear up something, and then thinking, well, what do I tear? I'm in my house, what am I gonna do? And you come back to, where's the place inside of you that you hear the still small voice that says, I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. And if I'm dwelling in the house of the Lord, why am I so worried about Pharaoh's house or Caesar's house? Because I'm still committed to Caesar's house more than I wish I would be. And the stability and the regularity, and I don't want war. Now, I'm real clear. I don't want war. Be clear about that. But do you understand what I'm saying? Psychologically, we have been so socialized to, this is the way it's supposed to be, and it's been pretty well true, and now it's not true. So, so in that regard, the chaos is good because it gets us off the throne. It gets us turning to the only source of power. It gets us turning to the only thing you can count on, that we claim we're counting on anyway, but we're hedging our bets. We're claiming it, but we're kind of hoping that we don't have to go too far with it. I mean, don't get crazy now, just, this sounded good, but at the end of the day, I want the government to work. Well, what's the government got to do with it? If you, in fact, understand that this is Caesar's job, and that the people over here that are people of faith have a different job. You see, I mean, there's a lesson in everything. And I don't like the lessons now. I want to be clear about that. And so I want to change the whole thing, the whole curriculum, because I want the curriculum to fit what I would like to have. Well, but God is just laughing at me saying, right, when you get done with that, come back and I'll give you your assignment. So because, I mean, we know this about ourselves. We just want to get up in the mornings and not have it be too complicated. Don't we? I mean, that's why I watch fairy tales, because I need a break. I need to go be in a world that works and magic happens. And then I have to come back to this one that doesn't work quite that way. Though some things are magical, God speaking is sometimes magical, because it comes right, the message comes right at the moment when you were about to get down with despair. And then, the ladybug shows up on your, I love ladybugs, and when they show up, I'm always feel like that they came to remind me that there's more than this world that you worry about, Or cardinals, some people. What are your symbols? Where are the things that exist for you? When we pulled up today, some deer ran from somewhere here, and it's so lovely for me, because when nature shows up that way, I just feel so encouraged. Yeah, there's a reality bigger than this reality of war and craziness and disruption and people hating each other and all. That's one set of realities that I have to navigate, but that is not the only set. So let me come back to where the other one is, and then my enemies become a different thing in this world. But if I stay over here in this world, I'm going to get myself in a mess, right? So anyway, y'all, it's hard stuff. That's all I can say. It's hard stuff, and there are no prescriptions, but there is a way. It's not a prescription, but it is a companion. It is Jesus companioning us as we honestly engage where we are and how we are feeling and what we wish for, and being open to letting God shine light on those situations and shine light on us as we deal with folks that, there are people in the world who've turned themselves over to evil, and those people need to be resisted, they need to be dealt with, and they need to be held accountable, but I don't get to hate them. I mean, and I want to hate them. I do, don't you? Don't you want to hate them? So, but we don't get to. I mean, that is what Jesus is saying. Jesus didn't say don't resist them. He said pray for them. I don't want to pray for them either. After you, pardon, what'd you say? No, I'm going to tell you how to pray for God to soften your heart so you see that your greatest enemy is also a child of God, and that God loves them as much as you. Now, that is what I really don't like. Because I don't want God to love them. Do you want God to love them? You want God to do something to them.
I want God to drop a bus on them.
And God does not make folks that God doesn't love. So everybody on the planet is loved by God. Now, that just really doesn't sit well with vengeance. I mean, good Lord have mercy. How can you love Hitler and Idi Amin and all these horrible human beings? God loves them. Now that's so shocking to me sometimes when it just really zeroes in on my head and I sit with it. But I know it's either that God loves everybody or God's a hypocrite. And I can go with God loving them better than I can God being a hypocrite. Yes, ma'am.
I have an example that is not the current political situation. Back in the long ago, when I was in graduate school, I had a professor there.
Can you stand up? They can't hear
Oh,
you.
I'm sorry. Back in the long ago.
Can you stand up?
Oh, yes. When I was in graduate school, I had a professor who did me sort of wrong after academic wrong over the years. And I did finally escape from that and in 12 years finished graduate school. And I hated it. I just hated it. Finally, one other professor had taken me aside and said, "Don't you get it? He's never going to work with you." And then, dumb me, the light bulb went off. Okay, so I am graduated. I have my PhD. I'm so cool. I still hated him. And then I heard that he'd come down with tongue cancer. And I had a gleeful gladness. And then I thought, I don't want to be the kind of person who has gleeful gladness that another human being, I'd forgotten to think of them as a human being, that another human being has a terrible, painful, awful illness. And so I weaned myself out of that hatred to an indifference. I want to know, how do you get from that, okay, I can see this as a child of God, and therefore I'll let them be, to something that's more active.
That's active?
That's more active, because I think of love as an action rather than a feeling.
Well, it just depends. I mean, we've got this attitude in our lives that we've got to be active about everything, and we don't have to be. I mean, you just leave them be. And for in your case, the last thing I want to say, because we got to stop, and I know Jillian's, I'm going to stop. is that you have to do what your soul requires you to do. So I can say you don't have to do anything. I don't have to do anything. But you might have to do something. And if you do, you'll hear what I believe you'll hear. If you need to write this person a card, go see them, go, lay down on the ground and tell them you're sorry. Whatever you need to do will be clear to you, but you have to figure that out with your own processes and the way you pay attention. And part of the way you know that is if you don't have any peace about it. For me, if something keeps on staying on my mind, it means it's not resolved inside myself, and I need to keep asking myself, well, what? And listening for the answer. But this idea that I gotta go make it all right, we need to get over that, because half the time we can't make it right anyway. We need to listen to our hearts and see what we hear and not try to smash the message. And we have to stop. I'm sorry. Thank you so much. Or they're gonna come bother me again, so. I think you're supposed to go to some other workshop or something.